Welcome to The Elephant in the Org, presented by the Fearless People Experience. Do you know those things in the workplace that make work suck, but remain unchanged? Well, those are the elephants we're here to talk about. We believe that these topics can and should be addressed with common sense, courage, and compassion. We may not have all the answers, and we're definitely not always going to be right. But we're here to build a better people experience. We gotta start somewhere. Let's go.
Welcome back to the Elephant in the Org, presented by the Fearless People Experience. I'm Danny Glush. I'm joined by Cacha.
Hello.
And Marion Anderson.
Good morning.
Ladies, let's talk about meeting culture. It's how a lot of us, especially in the sort of like thought field, engage in our work, right? We're busy. We have meetings on our calendar. But it's different in different organizations, and I don't think anyone really talks about it and how impactful that is on our day-to-day actual like experience as employees, as workers. What's good? What's bad? What's psychologically safe? Like, how should we be doing meetings? I mean, that probably varies, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think you've just asked, a question, the equivalent of how do we solve the problems in the Middle East, right? It's like, there's no immediate solution in sight and it's humongous. Here's the thing, right? And I'm sure you've experienced this as well, but most organizations have meetings about meetings, about meetings, about meetings, right? And I know that you've been part of that. I've been part of that. And you're often sitting in the room thinking, well, here's 2 hours of my life I'm never going to get back, which is, in this day and age, an absolute abomination that we're so careless with time and resource. But the other thing is that, apart from the lack of productivity, it just makes us check out, Yeah. The other thing that really worries me, and this isn't just a US thing, but I do feel like I see it here more, is that it's almost like a badge of honor to be, my back-to-back meetings, my calendar's just, right?
Yeah.
And people
every single one of us have said that, right? Like in our working relationships with each other and with the peers that we've had as well. And I think there's 2 ends of that, right? I think there are people who view it as a badge of honor and people who just weighs them down.
Yeah.
Right? Where you're just like wiped out and exhausted because you're like, I can't have, if you're in meetings all the time, how are you going to get your work done?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
you're doing your work while you're in the meeting. So you're only like 20% engaged in the actual meeting and you're trying to do your work, but then your work's not your best. Like it's a culture thing though, right?
It really is.
And I think Marion, I'd be very interested to hear from our international listeners because America has a very interesting, unique sort of like culture around work. We're very puritanical in our roots, very much like work.
Workaholic-y, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, in the Venn diagram of people who like owned their back-to-back meetings as a badge of honor and those who are actually like it's destroying them, it's almost a perfect circle. Like, but that's what we allow. And if you say, I'm just in back-to-backs again, and you're like trying to throw it out there as like I'm super important or I'm super busy, like look at me.
Yeah.
If that's not pushed back on and said like, whoa, why are you in back-to-backs? Like, do you need to be in all those meetings? Like, if there's not that cultural pushback to say like, that's not good, we need to fix that.
Yeah.
If it's like me too, aren't we little good worker ants? Like, it's just gonna be awful.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, we've talked before about, our lovely friends in France who, not meetings, but they do have very strict rules about not replying to emails outside of their contractual working hours, right? It's a similar type thing.
Yeah.
Because there is that fear when you're in a day crammed with meetings about meetings that, you get to the end of the day and you've not looked at one email, you've not dealt with any other fires that have happened that day. So, the French have been like, well, no, you're not going to deal with that when you finish. You're not going to respond to emails. You're going to go home and you're going to, be a human being. Culture really is something that we know is very difficult to change. You can't change culture overnight. I do see there are shifts in the US, thank God. I think that the millennials and the exennials and the Gen Zs coming through are not tolerating that same crap anymore, which is great. And so
Mm-hmm.
see that shift. But it's still going to take another 10, 15 years for that really to look and feel very differently. And I don't know what that will look and feel like across all industries. Obviously, I'm talking primarily from a knowledge sector, but that might look and feel different in other places. But getting back to the whole meeting culture thing, fundamentally, it comes from the absolute core root of the very base of the foundations of the culture of that organization, right? Is time valued? A lot of companies will say we value time, right? Do
Yeah.
you? Do you really? You've just had
Yeah.
me.
If you've never questioned how you're using time, do you actually value time? Right?
And let's be clear though, that's not measuring time as
No.
that's
That's using time, right? So then I think like we talk about meetings, right? And the culture of meetings. And like my favorite kind of meeting is where you're collaborating with someone, where you're actually working together on something. And because in the remote landscape, that's how you do it, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not going to be in a conference room or side by side with someone at a desk. You collaborating is on a Zoom call or a Teams meeting or something like that. But at the end of it, why do you feel good about that meeting? Because you produced something, because you got your thoughts out, whatever kind of project you were in, like Marion said earlier, right? We're in a thought space. So sometimes a meeting is literally just bouncing ideas off each other to get to the work that you have to do.
Yeah.
And other times, and when you have those kind of meetings, like that's the meeting I want, a meeting with intent, right?
That's
a meeting with a
you
purpose.
You see it on your calendar and you're like, sweet, I'm excited to log into that meeting.
Yes, exactly. But when you have that meeting that says like X prep, whatever the subject is, right? And you're like, okay, I'm literally going to be hearing everyone else talk. This could have been an email.
Ooh, I mean, everyone says that. Oh, this meeting could have been an email, but then they don't send the email. Like, just send the email.
Well, and I do think it's a double-edged sword, to be very honest, sometimes, because sometimes the content you have to cover it could just be an email. The email would be so long that you'd roll your eyes and not want to read it.
Yeah.
So I do see why sometimes it's one of those things where it could be better, but we have we talk about culture. That inherently means you're going to get an entire mishmash of personality and different kinds of combinations of how people take in information and want to receive it. And that all applies to your meetings, right? So it's not just putting on an agenda. An agenda isn't like, we're going to talk about this, this, and this. Cool. But it's not everything. And so like, I'm just being very honest. Like for me, collaborative meetings are the ones that I love, but, Danny and Marion, I'm super curious from your guys' perspective, how would you want to approach getting out of the meetings for meetings and into those meetings that actually have the intent that we look forward to? I'd love to hear from you guys how you would want to approach it.
Well, I think that some of those meetings, they become about other meetings because people are uncomfortable like taking accountability, standing up and really putting it out there and saying like, this is just going to get done now. They would rather kick that down the road because once something has to just like, this is what we're doing, like that action, that's when all of a sudden they get to be like, oh, this either worked or it didn't, and someone's going to be held accountable. Like, I do think that there is a bit of dodginess in the like, we're just gonna keep talking about this as opposed to putting pen to paper. And you know me, I love a good like draft, revision, input, feedback, redraft, revision like phase of a project. But like at some point we need to like commit. And like Amazon talks about like the disagree and commit kind of a thing. But like that whatever, like I think that's a kind of a toxic culture bit, but like the commitment part, like yes, I think there needs to be a point in meetings, and this is where like good team leadership or just leadership in general comes up of, okay, we've talked enough, let's do, right? Like now it's time to turn our thought planning into collaboration. Let's start saying you're doing this, you're doing that, or we're doing this together. Let's do. Instead of the like talk. Great, we're going to have a meeting to think about maybe possibly considering talking about having a meeting, and like, oh, like we just need to put it out there and say, I'm owning this. It's going to be done by this time. Who wants to work with me on it?
Yeah.
I love that. I feel like you saying that just made me think like that explains why we all get on so well, because every single one of us is very much like a go-getter and a doer of like, we get to a point and then we just want to take action. Like, great, what are we doing next? Right? Marion says that to us all the time when we're talking about stuff and planning things for these episodes. Great. So what's next? Right? So you saying that, I was just like, I was hearing Marion in my head. But Marion, how about you? What are your thoughts on that?
I've got lots of thoughts as per usual. No surprise. One of the best things, one of the most kind of revealing things that I was exposed to over this year was really good conversations with our good friend Chris Dyer, and actually using his book. It's a bit bloody, but there we go.
So blurry.
It's bloody, but it says remote work. Is part of the reason for my PhD research, because he's written an incredible book about remote work, and his story of how he took his business from being in person to being fully remote. And this is like 2008. This is not recent, right? So this is someone who's been kind of trailblazing. And, in one of our conversations, he talked a lot about meetings, and he realized just how unproductive meetings were and what a waste of time that they were. And they completely, reimagined how they conducted meetings. And one of the important things that he told me was he had an epiphany when I can't remember the exact scenario, but he realized that when you invite people to a party, like if someone says to you, hey, I'm inviting you to a birthday party, you kind of know what to expect. You're going to turn up, you're going to take a gift, there's probably going to be food, there's probably going to be games or music, and then there'll be a cake and you'll sing happy birthday. And generally once that's done, it's adios, right? I'm out. And so you know what's expected of you. And his reflection was, if you don't know what's expected of you, how do you know how to kind of play the game in the meeting and make it the most productive, right? Again, a birthday party for kids, Danny, 2 hours maybe, they come, they play, they have some cake, and then they all go home, right?
That's the most exhausting experience in the world.
Yeah, I bet. So he took that kind of, he took that knowledge and applied it to business, and what they did was created very specific types of meetings.
Yeah.
And so when you were invited to this meeting, you knew by the name of it that it was this type of meeting, it would last this long, it would be facilitated in this way, and what the clear expectations were. And it sounds so simple, but actually, like revolutionary, right? We'll put the details of that book in the show notes, because it actually is an incredible read, and it's got some amazing insights. But there's lots of ways that you can make meetings much more psychologically safe, because everybody's clear what their part is. Yeah. And that people will have the confidence to know that it's not a waste of time. So
yeah, and that's so important. I was talking with a friend who does consulting work for organizations, Stephen Chapman, shout out, friend of the pod. We'll have to get him on at some point. But he was talking about, and I think this plays into the psychological safety bit, because psychological safety doesn't mean like happy, good, everybody's always positive, right?
Right.
He was saying that a meeting should not get scheduled if there's not going to be conflict. And
interesting.
He said even in the stand-ups, right? The engineering sort of like agile methodology of daily stand-ups, here's what I'm doing. The conflict is we're all working on this project. Here's where I'm at. I'm behind. I need help, right? There's some of that like, this is just honest. We need to tell each other where we are and ask for help. Super psychologically safe when it's done well, right? Those meetings, those agile stand-ups go awful if people aren't honest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? If they're like, oh yeah, I'm on schedule, but they're not on schedule, like the whole project starts to fall apart. Similarly, like in the knowledge work, if we're talking about, hey, here's a strategy, like, or strategic options for us to take as an organization, like, and if you just let the sort of loudest person have the floor and talk, and everyone else is like, whatever, they're not engaged, like there isn't that actual tension and conflict, it ends up nothing happens, right? Like you need that, like, if you're not trying to solve that, if you're not willing to get in and take ownership of how you think things should be, then like you shouldn't be in the meeting.
But if you can't do that, there's a fundamental flaw with your organization's.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right. Like it needs to be like psychologically safe to where you can be like, whoa, no, we can't do that. Here's why. Or at least I disagree and think that would be a bad one. Let's actually, we're meeting. Let's take this time to like put that out. I think too often people are like, oh, this is bad, but I'm not going to say anything because of like, there's a little bit of a performativity, like there's
right, or you've got like a power dynamic that like is unsavory, unsafe, right?
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes, and this is a negative statement, but I'm going to say it anyway. Dang it! Sometimes that what you have to say isn't going to be heard anyway, so save your breath.
Yeah,
right?
And those are all examples of not psychological safety. Right?
Exactly, right? Like these are, unfortunately, that lack of psychological safety in situations where there needs to be a change, an augmentation. When you don't have that, then things just continue not only where they're going, but typically not in an upward trajectory for whatever it is, right? Because if it's a bad idea and then it gets rolled out to the org, now you've got a whole other problem that's happening.
Right?
Or you're going to roll it out to your team, maybe not as big as your whole organization, but like if it's going out to a team or it's this initiative that really should have been really, really redone. And, but again, power dynamics are tricky, and not all organizations actually build in psychological safety in the context of taking the risk to say something isn't the way that it should be.
Yeah.
Like how many times, Cacha, were we working on projects together and it got tense. We were not in agreement. It was like total opposites, and I'm just like frustrated.
Yeah.
But we were committed to being there and being frustrated with each other and working through it. Like those are productive meetings.
They are. And it's a willingness, right?
Yeah, you just saying your thing and me going, oh no, that's bad, and then not saying anything, that's an unproductive meeting. Like we just shouldn't have had that call. And I think that's part of the problem is people aren't willing to see meetings as this, like, this is a place to battle things out, but like in a good way. Like we're all on the same team. We're all on the same, like we have the same goals, or at least we should be.
Yeah.
Marion, what were you going to say?
I'm just thinking about it being in a healthy way. I'm probably not a proponent of using language like conflict and battle because it doesn't set the right tone. But I understand the context of it. But it really goes back to that understanding of what are the roles and responsibilities within the meeting context, right? Which again, going back to that birthday party analogy, just really kind of clicked with me. So fundamentally, the organization at a very base level needs to determine this in this company, aligning with our values, this is how we conduct meetings. And if you don't conduct meetings, then you're not like this, then you're not working within our values, and that's a conversation, right? And it's not meant to feel like a nanny state, but it is meant to feel like, a collegial and safe environment where everybody knows what's expected and, there's no nasty surprises. Because the one thing that would unhinge all of the great work that the collective put into creating psychological safety is one rogue player going off and having a tantrum and in a leadership meeting and throwing their cup against the wall or whatever crap they do, right? and that just completely blows up all of the work that's gone into it. So it has to be something that that you're really going to commit to. In fact, a great line from one of my favorite books, Eat, Pray, Love, is kind of like getting a tattoo on your face. You want to be committed, right? So that's it. You if you're going to do it right, and you can't half-ass it.
Yeah.
Meetings are it's one of those things, right? At the end of the day, meetings are an essential part of work life. You're going to have meetings. You're going to be in meetings that you really don't want to be in, and you'd rather be in bed sleeping and not getting called into work for. And you're going to have meetings that you look forward to. And I think one of the healthiest things for teams to also consider, and we've talked a lot about like, the intent of the meeting and like when you want to attend the meeting, and like when it's productive, when there's intent, all of those things are really like, that's honestly the best way to have a meeting. But I also want to just take a moment to talk about the importance of the meeting structure and culture in the remote workspace, because it's so much more important, because it's the only way you have to work and get to know the people that you work with. It's not like in days of yore where you just knocked on someone's door and said, let's go to the water cooler.
Yeah.
I have no idea if that's what it was really. I have no idea if that's what it was really like. It's what it looks like on cartoons, okay?
I did that at university sometimes. We didn't have a water cooler, but you just knock on someone's office. It's fun.
You go to the vending machine.
See, I'm a child. I would be like, knock on someone's doors is fun. Let me just knock on all of them.
And run away.
And run away. Exactly. Thank you, Marion.
Cacha, and I actually think this goes into something that I think a lot, you see it on social media and stuff, let's double click into that. Let's like all that language that is so like performative. I think really it seems so inauthentic that I think it really shuts down that ability to connect to people, because it's like, I'm not connecting to Cacha. I'm connecting to this like fake corporate, like it almost feels like you're an AI generated like
persona
that I'm interacting with. Like, if we allow that in our meetings, and like the only way we can connect as people is through meetings because we're all remote, like, but I can't connect to you because you feel like like you're playing a part as opposed to being authentic, then we're not actually connecting, right? And now our meetings are like the opposite of building relationships. Whatever. I don't know if that's where you were going, but like that sparked in me just like how awful that sort of performance is to just culture in general.
A little bit, but like on almost like flipping the coin a little bit. And I do agree. I think sometimes the language, right, you pick it up from other people, and it just like suddenly you start saying phrases that other people started saying, and it's natural, and it happens when you hear it all the time.
It's suboptimal.
It is, but it's just like, it's a very, very Pavlovian kind of situation there. But actually talking about like, we're talking about like work meetings in the context of, you've got projects, you're being informed of things, you're actually getting work done. But the meeting on the other side, right? That getting to know you meeting where you're setting aside time to have a meeting where you're not really having a meeting. You're having the kind of hangout time that you would have had in an office, right? The stuff and things where you have the ability of saying, like normally, like, I think, I don't remember where, right? But the stats saying that people working from home, people were more productive working at home because they didn't have the distractions that they had in the office, all of those side conversations, all of those, like, we're going to take a break, but it's really going to be a break. And like all of these things that happen in the office. And so how do you still get that break of like, I just want to interact with people, like when the pandemic started, I know that lots of companies were doing virtual happy hours where people were just bringing their coffee and maybe other things at the end of the day, depending on how people were treating the concept of a happy hour. But that's how people were still staying connected. And so I don't think that businesses do a good job in the remote and or even hybrid space where they're giving the opportunity to leverage a meeting to not be a meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's important. That's where I was actually going with it, Danny. And it's something that, in our previous work life, we all did a really great job at. But there's so much intentionality behind it and so much willingness to actually put something on the calendar that isn't going to make the company money.
Yeah.
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 I think that's a important part of it is the acknowledgement of this is not actually producing anything, but what it is doing, and there's all these engagement surveys and engagements down. Yada. You know what? This is taking time to make sure that the people who work at your company have a connection to the people they work with, so that they want to log in at 8 in the morning.
Yep.
So that they don't say, I would just rather sleep or do anything other than show up to work.
Yeah.
It's, oh, wow, I'm going to have a call with Kylie, with Pauline, with, like Colin, right? Like, I'm looking forward to all of these meetings today because I took the time to connect with them in
Yep.
non-productive time.
Yep.
Like, happy people, what's our saying? Happy people are equals productive people equals profit. Something like that, right? But
Yeah.
like you need that. You need them to be happy.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, right, it's a basic human need that we need to have a sense of connection to those around us, right? It's just basic, primal, visceral need. So we have to be, switched on to the fact that in order to create that joyful, psychologically safe, utopia within an organizational culture, we have to allow that time to be invested for that bonding. And that bonding isn't necessarily, hey, let's everyone do an assault course. Hey, it's not that kind of crap, but it's like one of the other great things that I'd learned from Chris's book was they actually realized that one-to-one meetings between manager and employee were kind of a waste of time, unless it was obviously a specific developmental conversation. So they got rid of one-to-ones, and instead what they did was they would have group meetings, and I think they were called bonding, and basically they would go around the group where they would just provide their update, and they would share anything that was challenging, anything that they needed support with. And what they actually created was a peer-to-peer coaching mechanism, quite organically, because by listening to everyone else's work and where their challenges were, everyone else was able to lean in and give support and guide and ask questions and stuff. And one of the most powerful things out of all of that was that the leader would always speak last, because if the leader speaks first, employees that report to them are more likely to try and mirror them or say things to please them or whatever that might be. So they integrated that, and what they found was the establishment of a much more psychologically safe meeting culture, stronger peer relations, and actually they were more productive because whenever someone was either maybe having some kind of personal problem that the team maybe had an understanding of, they were able to jump in and support. Whereas if they didn't have that, they would never have known, and that person could have struggled on. So again, there's lots of really powerful things that can be done that are really simple that can make the world of difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you really nailed it. Like that bonding, like, hey, we're here together to be, we're a team bonding. And team bonding is not trust falls and nonsense like that. And some of that stuff like
still happens.
Yeah, it does. And sometimes in really crazy ways. There was a whole thing with the Panda Express group that they got in big trouble trying to do one of these team bonding things with their managers. That's a whole other discussion. But like, how is it that you feel connected? Right? How is it that you feel that you guys on a team get to support one another? Like, that's the stuff that matters.
Yeah, it is, without a doubt. At the end of the day, you spend a third of your life at work, working, wherever that location might be. You want to enjoy it. You want to get stuff out of it and not just a salary. We talk about psychological contracts, right? That psychological contract, I work for you, you pay me money, but it runs deeper than that. I want to get a sense of accomplishment and achievement and enjoyment and all of those things. And if I'm not getting that, then my psychological contract is going to wane and then it just becomes, fragile, and it just takes one thing for it to smash. And as we know, once you smash that psychological contract, there's no going back. It's not repairable. So, all of these things strengthen that and help retention and all the other things that can be problematic and cost money if we don't get it right. So it's just a no-brainer, right? Just do it. Just do it.
So
get better at meetings. That's moral of the story, kids. Get better. Do better.
Yeah.
Get good, noobs. Yeah, meetings can be good and they can be beneficial.
100%.
And I think it plays into the overall, right, like how we approach work. And one of the things that just kept ringing in my ears was, if we're just here to fill a seat for 40 hours, then we don't even really care if or not. Like it's what's the cultural mindset? It's almost the like, hey, you get more work done if you have a 4-day work week, because like, I can't waste my time. I'm only here for 32 hours. I can't take that meeting. That hour meeting, we're going to do it in 15 minutes, right? Yeah. You just have this mindset of being more efficient, effective, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing how closely you actually will hold to your boundaries when you know that you are limited in something.
Yeah.
Right. Versus the like, you don't want to, but you're going to begrudgingly accept whatever that invitation is. And I think ultimately, when you're looking at the corporate meeting culture, we're obviously leaning in from the context of the American corporate meeting culture. I think what it really comes down to is it shouldn't be the badge of honor to have your whole calendar be full of meetings.
Yeah.
Your badge of honor should be how proud you are in the work that you're completing. That should be where your badge of honor truly lies.
Wise words, Cacha. Wise words.
We know what we're going to clip for the social media content on that one. Thanks everyone for listening. You can reach us at elephant@thefearlesspx.com. Please remember to like, follow, subscribe, leave some reviews. You know what? If someone gives us a 5-star review and writes something, I'm going to read it on one of the podcasts, because that seems fun. So there's your challenge, everybody. We'll be back next week. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night, day, morning. I don't know when people listen to this. Please stop the recording.